Hey students, welcome to week 4. We will begin this week by going over the new essay model that we'll be working towards. This time you're going to have a little bit more time to work on your essay. If the first essay felt really fast to you, that's because it really was. And this time we'll be able to take just another week in order to work towards those polished final versions of the essay. That said, we'll be working with process analysis. And let's just kind of get into what exactly process analysis is. So process analysis, let me see if I can shift that for you. Here we go. There are two different types of process analysis, and your book breaks this down into directional and informational. So a how-to essay or directional explains how something works or how something's done so that readers who want to or need to, they can take that information and perform the process themselves. So think of this like a recipe. When you want to know how to cook apple fritters, let's say, you would read the you would read the recipe and it would give you a step-by-step instructional guide so that you could make those apple fritters yourself. With a how it works essay or a directional essay, informational. This is basically an essay that explains how something works or how something's done for readers who just want to understand the process, but they're not actually going to perform it themselves. So for instance, there's this show, I think it's on the Learning Channel, but it's called How It's Made. And essentially it'll show you like cell phone cases, how it's made. And they go through the step-by-step guide of how these things like a cell phone case would actually be made, but the information is not for you to actually take and then make your own cell phone case, but rather just so you know how they're made. Okay, so we'll be talking about both of those kinds of processes, but for your essay, you will be writing a directional essay. So it's how to do or how to make something so that someone else can perform the process. So process analysis does the following things. One, it defines technical terms. So if there's any technical terms at the beginning of an essay, typically you would want to make sure you define what those are. It's going to provide any background information that the readers need. 3, it will describe any necessary equipment. Sometimes there's no equipment necessary, especially probably not in the processes that I am going to give you as a choice for your essays. 4, it's going to provide an appropriate level of details and example. Think of that as like the body of your essay. And 5, it's going to anticipate some problem areas or some concerns and hopefully offer some solutions to your readers. One thing I do want to make mention of with the process analysis is that really, truly, this is an exercise in thinking about what your readers need in order to complete the process. So at every step of the way, you have to really think about, okay, will my readers understand this step? Will they know what to do next? How can I help them through this thing? So with your introduction, it's going to identify the process, and it will include an explicit thesis statement about the nature of the process. So you can find some of those examples of a thesis statement for a process analysis essay. Let me just find the page. I'm flipping. Here we go. It's on 221. And you'll want to make sure that your thesis is doing more than just making a statement, right? You'll want to be clear about what that process actually is. Hopefully it's interesting to readers. Hopefully you've done that in the introduction, right? Really pulled them in and made them want to know more. And that thesis statement should say something about the usefulness or maybe the importance of the process. So here's an example. Switching to a low carbohydrate diet can improve weight control dramatically. So as you can see right there, this is almost could be an argumentative type of a process essay, because switching to a low carbohydrate diet isn't the only way you can improve weight control, right? But for this particular writer, that's the essay that they're going to write about, and then therefore they're going to follow the steps through. So in thinking about that, you really have to kind of say, am I telling Am I giving the reader something more than just an obvious fact? You wouldn't just say, right, something like, you can lose weight, right? That's not really a thesis statement. You want to give them something more, as I said, about the nature of the process or what's going to be the outcome of that process. So body paragraphs. In the body paragraphs, these are going to be organized chronologically. So think of step-by-step description of the process itself. So every topic sentence is going to be a new step. That whole paragraph is going to be developed by explaining exactly how to do that step. So sometimes we are given just a general step, and then we have to break it down for a reader. What does that actually mean? Sometimes there's many steps within the topic sentence itself. Then in every single body paragraph, it's going to be your job to provide a specific example to show the reader how to do that particular step. So again, this is just kind of a brief overview of what the essay is going to look like, but that's what you should have in mind. For the conclusion, just as in your description essay, the conclusion is going to draw to a close and hopefully remind the reader what they can or should be able to do now that they know how with your process. So sometimes a conclusion can be a helpful reminder. Sometimes it's just encouragement for a reader to keep going or to stick with it. Sometimes it might reframe the outcome for the reader. And again, it just kind of depends on your process in terms of how you would want to tackle that conclusion. But these are just a few suggestions here. No. Okay. So a process analysis essay will be an informative essay that forces you to consider all the many components of a process. And you will get your choices for the essay in week 5. But just so you know, for instance, one of those choices would be to tell a reader how to immigrate to another country. And so again, you would have to think about all the steps and all the things that a reader would need to know in order to successfully immigrate to another country. So again, in thinking about the essay itself, you'll want to think about introduction types, conclusion types, who is your audience, what's the purpose of your essay, what's the tone of your essay. I have seen tones of essays, process essays before that are pretty jokey or sarcastic, and sometimes they work depending on what the subject matter is. You'll want to have concrete details when it comes to your examples that you give in each body paragraph. You'll want to be as specific as possible. And again, that's going to take some good writing skills in terms of being concrete and using strong verbs and accurately depicting what the reader needs to know. You'll want to think about organization, about what order those steps should go in. You'll also think about transitions and sentence variations, so we don't get bored with reading your essay because it says first, second, last, right? So you'll want to sort of think about all of those things. So the next thing I want to talk about, besides process, is the Book of Unknown Americans. And this is a wonderful book. It reads really quickly. Generally, the chapters are fairly short, and the chapters are going to alternate narrators. And so, for instance, if you pause this video right now and go get out your book, and you open up to the very first chapter, which begins on page 3, you'll see that this chapter is called Alma. And just to kind of give you a heads up, Alma will be telling this chapter. That tells us who will be talking in the chapter. And one thing that I found really helpful in reading this book is to create a character list as I go along and read. Ultimately, we get a lot of information about a lot of people, and it's really easy, I think, with a lot of characters in a novel to lose track of who's who. And so what I've just done here, and you can see right across the top of my page right here, and you can do this in your notebook too, is I just wrote the 4 major characters that we come across in this first chapter. And as I learn information about each one of them, I just sort of jot it down, and I typically try to put a page number behind it so that way I know where I found that information. And ultimately, as we read more and more and more, these lists get longer and longer and longer. So you may want to devote a whole or half a page just to Alma, and another half a page to Maribel, and another page to Arturo, right? Just so that it's easier for you. And to show you what I mean exactly, excuse me, if you haven't already read chapter 1, I would like you to pause this video and read Alma's chapter before starting, but I do just kind of want to show you what I would do starting in chapter 2, which is on page 12. So here, this chapter is called Mayor, and again, as I told you, I know that that means that he will be the speaker of this particular chapter. So I'm going to just read, and I'm going to show you where I would stop and start to jot down some information. So here we go. We heard they were from Mexico. Definitely, my mom said, staring at them through our front window as they moved in. Look at how short they are. She let the curtains fall back in place and walked to the kitchen, wiping her hands on the dish towel slung over her shoulder. I looked, but all I saw was 3 people moving through the dark, carrying stuff from a pickup truck to Unit 2D. They cut across the headlights of the truck a few times, and I made out their faces, but only long enough to see a mom, a dad, and a girl about my age. So I'm going to stop right there. I already get the sense that they're talking about Alma, Maribel, and Arturo. So I know that what Mayor is saying is that he and Maribel are about the same age, but I'm not quite sure about that yet. I do just want to write Mom up there because I know that we have another character coming. I don't know her name yet, but we'll find out soon. So, my dad asked when I joined him, and my mom at the dinner table. I couldn't really see anything, I said. And I'm just going to jot down Dad here. Do they have a car? I shook my head. The truck's just dropping them off, I think. My dad sawed off a piece of chicken and stuffed it in his mouth. Do they have a lot of things? He asked. It didn't seem like it. Good, my dad said. Maybe they are like us then. We heard from Quisqueya Solis that their last name was Rivera. And again, you'll see that I've added Rivera up here. And I've also made a little column for Quisqueya Solis. If you can't say that name, I've had students last semester that were calling her Quesadilla, or whatever you want to call her, Miss Solis, that's fine too. And I'm probably mispronouncing her name, but anyways. And they're legal, she reported to my mom over coffee one afternoon. All of them have visas. How do you know? My mom asked. That's what Nelia told me. She heard it from Fito. Apparently, the mushroom farm is sponsoring them. Of course, my mom said. I was in the living room eavesdropping. Even then, I was supposed to be doing my geometry homework. So that kind of gives me a clue right here to Mayor's age. I'm going to guess. He's a high school student. And I can always go back and change that later. Quisqueya to me comes across as a bit of a gossip. We see that when she's saying, Nelia told me, she heard it from Fito. So again, I'm just going to put those page numbers down there because it helps me sort of keep track of where I got that information. I'm going to keep reading though. Well, my mom went on, clearing her throat, it would be nice to have another family in the building. They'll be a good addition. Quisqueya took a quick look at me before turning back to my mom and hunching over her coffee mug. Except, she said. My mom leaned forward. What? Quisqueya said. The girl. She looked at me again. My mom peered over Quisqueya's shoulder. Mayor, are you listening to us? I tried to act surprised. Huh? Me? My mom knew me too well, though. She shook her head at Quisqueya to signal that whatever Quisqueya was going to say, she'd better save it if she didn't want me to hear it. Why, no. We don't need to talk about it then, Quisqueya said. You'll see for yourself eventually, I'm sure. My mom narrowed her eyes, but instead of pressing, she sat back in her chair and said loudly, Well? And then, More coffee? So again, I might just jot down legs, listening to the gossip between his mother and Quisqueya. We know something's up with Maribel. We got a few clues in chapter 1, but we're getting another one now. And maybe I don't want to write it under Maribel's category yet because this is just coming as gossip from Quisqueya, so I might write something over here. Tells Mayor's mom that something is up with Maribel. And again, we are not sure what that is yet, but we're getting kind of clues here. And again, they're important things to write down because we are getting so many characters in such a short amount of space. So again, I'm just kind of showing you here what I would do in terms of how to take notes. And again, as we come across characters' names, in fact, I think the next chapter after Mayor's chapter is Rafael Toro. And I know because I've read this book before that Rafael Toro is Mayor's dad, and so I would replace dad with his name here because it can be helpful. And again, when you figure out mom's name, which you will in the Rafael chapter, you can replace it here. So this is just kind of a way that I would do this as I read through the book. I really strongly suggest that while you are reading the Book of Unknown Americans that you slow down. If you enjoyed listening to me read the book, I would suggest reading it aloud. It really is a great way to engage your brain in terms of the practice of reading aloud and trying to understand what you're saying. You can get this book on audio as well. I think it's available on audible.com, but just kind of depends on your comfort level too. But again, strongly suggest taking notes. So please do that. So last thing I want to say for this week's video is again, we are starting to look at the process essay model, so please be sure you read your textbook. Take lots of notes on that. I believe 3 of your quiz questions, or 2 of your quiz questions actually have to do with those pages. And then the other quiz questions are actually related to the Book of Unknown Americans. So make sure you read and take notes. If you need to read through it twice, this book is one that we're going to be reading over the next few weeks. And generally you're going to be reading chunks of pages, about 30 to 50 pages every week. So it's going to happen really quickly. You do have a quiz that'll be due by Wednesday, a discussion board that's due by Thursday, and then responses to 2 discussion boards by Saturday. So I will continue to do those live chats. I know a lot of students like that, so that they have time to ask questions or bounce ideas off of me. Certainly this week I would like all of you to try to participate in a chat if you can, especially as we're talking about the Book of Unknown Americans. It's really helpful to talk about why characters do the things they do or why certain things are said. And it can be helpful to bounce those ideas or ask those questions to myself and your classmates. So don't be afraid to join in. It's really just a casual thing if you can make it. So if you do have any questions or you have trouble or if you need something, I believe all of you know my email address by now, but certainly you are welcome to email me, and I will see you all on the discussion board. Bye.